Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time, way, way back, to a world that smells like wet hay, where shoes are mostly optional, and romance, well, it doesn't look anything like a candle at dinner. You're standing in a dirt-packed village where your idea of dating begins not with a flirty message but with your father shouting about how many sheep he'll get in return for marrying you off. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is. I love hearing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through ankle-deep mud, the path slick from a recent rain, trying to keep your balance while dodging a very determined goose. Your tunic sticks to your skin and your stomach grumbles with that low, gnawing emptiness you've gotten used to. You pass the thatched roofs of cottages that lean like they're too tired to stand straight, smoke curling from chimneys, carrying the faint smell of boiled cabbage. You're on your way to see her. Or him. Or maybe just, whoever your parents have in mind. In medieval Europe, love, if we can even call it that, begins at home. Not in your heart, but in your house. Or more specifically, in your father's livestock ledger. See, dating as we know it? That didn't exist. There were no movie nights, no awkward small talk over coffee. Instead, your first romantic encounter often involved standing awkwardly while your parents discussed your marriage prospects like a barter over turnips. You might be 12. Maybe 13. Old enough to do hard labor, old enough to marry. The average age of marriage varied wildly. Nobles sometimes waited till their 20s to finalize political unions, but among peasants, if you could carry firewood, you could carry a spouse. Picture it, your mother pulls you aside, brushes a smear of soot from your cheek with the same hand she just used to gut a chicken, and whispers, "The miller's son. He has strong calves." Strong calves, in this context, is high praise. It means he can haul grain and survive the plague. And that, apparently, is romantic. You sigh. Romance, in the sense we dream about today, blushing, butterflies, slow dances under twinkle lights, was less a priority than economic survival. Families married to combine land, merge labor forces, or forge alliances. Some historians still argue whether emotional connection even entered the equation for most people. But that doesn't mean people didn't want it. That spark. That heartbeat thudding, sweaty palm thing. It just had to sneak in through side doors. So there you are, trying to sneak a glance at someone across the field, past the sheep and the ever-watchful eyes of your entire extended family. And they're watching. Everyone's watching. Because your future is not yours alone, it belongs to your parents, your village, your parish priest, and the local gossip who saw you looking a little too long at the blacksmith's apprentice. One weird tidbit, in some medieval communities, particularly in parts of France, public mock marriage trials were staged when couples were suspected of sleeping together before marriage. The village elders, who probably hadn't smiled since Charlemagne, would sit in judgment, while the couple's neighbors gave testimony about things like how close their fires were burning. Cozy. The weather doesn't help. It's always cold or wet or dusty or all three. You don't have perfume, but you might rub wild mint under your arms. Or lavender if you're fancy. Or, hilariously, moss. Hey, it's absorbent. Your teeth aren't great. Your hair is usually hidden under a linen coif or cap, because if it's uncovered, people might assume you're, available. And yet, people still fall in love. Or something close to it. There are songs about secret kisses behind the bakehouse, and folktales where a poor shepherd wins a noblewoman's heart. Are they exaggerations? Absolutely. But even in a world where most marriages are arranged, the human brain still makes room for fantasy. Take the Welsh love spoons, for example. Young men would carve intricate wooden spoons and offer them as tokens of affection. These weren't for eating, they were symbolic, and if the girl kept it, that was as good as a yes. And yes, they included hearts, keys, and twisted vines, basically the medieval version of emoji flirting. You reach the village green, where people are gathering. A local feast day. Bunting flutters in the breeze, made from scraps of dyed cloth. Someone's roasting a pig over an open fire, and children chase a wheel of cheese downhill. The object of your affection is there, barefoot, laughing, eyes catching yours for half a second before flicking away. Your heart jumps. You straighten your back. You try not to trip over a rut in the earth. It's not love. Not yet. But it might be the closest thing you'll get in this century. And in that moment, you forget about the mud, the geese, and the chafing from your wool trousers. You forget that your parents are probably already negotiating your dowry over watered ale. You forget that romance in your world isn't a slow build, but a decision made before you're done growing. But you remember the look. That half-second glance. The smile. And somehow, that's enough to carry you through another week of goat herding and barley porridge. You wake up the next morning with straw in your hair and breath that could melt pewter. The sun hasn't risen fully yet, but the village is already alive with the clatter of buckets, the distant bleating of sheep, and that ever-present, slightly sour smell of unwashed humanity. You stretch, roll over in your rough wool blanket, and brace yourself for the part of the day no one talks about fondly, trying to not smell entirely like a cheese merchant's armpit. Hygiene in medieval times is, let's say, creative. You don't bathe every day. In fact, you probably don't bathe every week. A full body wash might be a seasonal event, or reserved for a feast day. Or never. But there are small rituals that pass for grooming. You take a cloth, dip it in tepid rainwater, and scrub your face, armpits, and wherever else the stink seems loudest. Your teeth. Not great. You might rub them with a mixture of crushed sage and salt. Maybe you chew on a twig to dislodge bits of yesterday's barley stew. Or parsley, if you're trying to impress someone. Not because it tastes good, it doesn't, but because it masks the odor of boiled onions. Which, unfortunately, is what half your diet consists of. And clothing? You don't have a closet, you have a garment. 1. Maybe 2, if your family's doing well. It's made of rough wool or linen and likely hasn't been washed in weeks. But you hang it near the fire each night so the smoke can cleanse it. By which we mean, make it smell like pork fat and ash instead of foot. And yet, despite all of this, you're still thinking about that glance from yesterday. That maybe romantic moment over roasted pig and uneven eye contact. So you do what you can to look presentable. You scrape your nails. You try to flatten your hair. You pick the least stained side of your tunic and hope the sun doesn't hit you from the wrong angle. Today, there's a reason to preen. A gathering at the churchyard. Not a wedding, but a saint's day, a rare excuse for everyone to come together and pretend to enjoy each other's company while secretly scoping out who's newly single, who's aged well, and who brought extra cider. You walk past the bakery, the air thick with the scent of sourdough and hot stones. The baker's daughter waves, and you immediately wonder if it means something. Does it? Historians still argue whether casual flirtation in medieval towns was common or scandalous. It likely depended on how many eyes were watching, and whose daughter you were eyeing. Of course, you're not alone. There are others preening, too. You spot someone adjusting their belt so it sits just right, medieval low-rise chic. Someone else dabs their neck with rosewater stolen from the manor herb garden. And someone's clearly gone overboard with lard in their hair again, the shine visible from space. Once gathered, the mingling begins. Slowly. Awkwardly. It's not a dance, it's a muddy shuffle. You offer polite nods, your hands stuffed in your sleeves. Talking to someone new, especially someone you're interested in, is tricky. You might comment on the weather, or the quality of this year's harvest. Flirting, as far as medieval rules go, involves an extreme amount of not quite saying what you mean. You catch sight of the person from yesterday. Your heart thuds, but of course, you can't just walk up. Oh no. That would be forward. So instead, you find yourself standing within 10 feet of them, pretending to inspect a goose. You cough. They glance over. You look away. It's the medieval version of sending a text that just says, "Hey." Eventually, conversation happens, if you're lucky. And it's halting. You talk about the saint, about the cider, about your uncle's new pig. There's a strange kind of modesty at play. You're not allowed to express too much interest too quickly. That might imply lust, which gets you lectures. Or worse, gossip. And chaperones. Always chaperones. A cousin. A neighbor. A priest. You can't even say the word fleece without someone assuming it's a euphemism. Privacy is almost impossible. Want a romantic moment? Better hope the cows are louder than your whispers. That doesn't stop people from trying. There are coded gestures, a flower tucked behind an ear, a ribbon left on a doorstep, a particular way of tying a belt. Courtship rituals vary wildly across time and region. In some places, handing someone a carved spoon meant you were serious. In others, a boy would serenade his love interest outside her window, with a lute, if he was lucky. Or a cowbell, if not. And yes, some went bold. In 14th century France, a tradition called chivalry allowed the community to serenade, read, harass, newlyweds or inappropriate couples with clanging pots and sarcastic songs. It was less about joy and more about social pressure, and maybe blowing off steam. Back in the churchyard, you and your maybe romance lock eyes again. They smile. You grin back. It's nothing. And everything. You part ways with nothing said aloud, but your chest is warm with possibility. That night, lying in your straw mattress again, you wonder, did they mean it? Will they be at the next gathering? Are their parents already arranging something behind closed doors? You hope not. You want this, whatever this is, to be yours. But hope in the medieval world is fragile. And often smelly. Still, you dream. Of that smile. Of brushing hands at the harvest festival. Of someday, maybe, actually talking for 5 minutes without someone's grandmother looming nearby. It's not much. But in this world, it's everything. The next time you see them, it's under the unwavering stare of Sister Agnes, who, despite being roughly 4'9" and permanently hunched, seems capable of detecting sin from half a mile away. You're not alone. Chaperones are a medieval inevitability. Like rain, taxes, and fleas. Dating, or rather, the slow, stumbling simulation of it, is never private. If you so much as attempt a lingering glance, a family member materializes like a bad omen, casually carrying a loaf of bread or a suspiciously clean laundry basket. You meet your maybe sweetheart in the village square. It's market day, and the place is heaving. Carts stacked with dried fish, sacks of grain, squealing pigs in makeshift pens, and the occasional enterprising rat. You're not here to buy anything. You're here because they'll be here. And where they are, so too is the ever-present, ever-breathing wall of supervision. They're with their aunt today. A woman with a jaw like a drawbridge and the emotional warmth of a church pew. She doesn't say anything, but her eyebrows are already doing the work of 3 angry priests. You wave. She scowls. Your beloved blushes. You're used to this. No one goes anywhere alone, not if there's even a whiff of courtship. Chaperoning is less about guidance and more about surveillance. It's how society keeps young people pure. Or, at the very least, not visibly scandalous. You manage a conversation, for minutes, tops. You talk about the weather, again. You compliment their tunic, even though it's clearly secondhand from their older sibling. They ask if your father's goats are still sick. Romance, medieval style. A woman hawking eels shouts in the background. The wind picks up, and the smell of manure wafts through like a divine warning. You both pretend not to notice. Just as your fingertips brush, ever so slightly, the ant clears her throat. It's a cough with centuries of judgment behind it. And poof, the moment vanishes like smoke from a damp fire. You make your way to the edge of the market and sit near the trough where horses drink. The cold stone seeps through your tunic. You think of the rules. The endless rules. No touching. No wandering. No overly suggestive basket weaving, whatever that means. In some towns, laws went even further. A 15th-century German statute literally banned dancing after sunset because, apparently, that's when hips get dangerous. Historians still debate whether these social restrictions were universally enforced or more of a performative standard, something whispered about in sermons and ignored in stables. But for you, they're real enough. Especially because there are always eyes. The village isn't big. Secrets don't stay secret. If you're seen walking together, just walking, there will be whispers. If you're caught holding hands, the parish priest might be casually waiting near your house, reminding your father about your immortal soul. And if things go too far, the consequences aren't just personal, they're public. Stocks. Fines. Forced apologies in front of the whole town. There's one story that still floats around from a nearby village. A couple caught kissing behind the bakehouse was made to walk backward around the church while carrying bundles of nettles. Naked. In November. You think that might be an exaggeration. Maybe. Still, people get creative. There are stories of lovers passing secret messages hidden inside loaves of bread. Or pretending to exchange tools at the smithy just to hold hands for a heartbeat. One popular trick. A nighttime meeting at the public well. If your family's asleep and the moon's out, maybe, just maybe, you get 10 stolen minutes together. Of course, that means risking both social ruin and frostbite. You remember a particularly bold couple from the village over. He was a shepherd, she was the daughter of a local reeve. They met in the fields for months, sneaking time between grazing sessions and rainstorms. Eventually, they were caught. No one knows exactly what happened after, but he disappeared and she was sent to a convent. The kind without windows. You sigh. The system is built to prevent spontaneity. Every whisper, Every gesture, every shared cup of cider must pass the test of respectability. The chaperone isn't just a person, it's an institution. A mindset. A spiritual air horn. Even when you're technically allowed to court, meaning your families have spoken and livestock negotiations are underway, you still need supervision. It's like being on a date with your grandmother and your confessor and a royal tax auditor. But here's the thing, you're still doing it. Somehow, despite the rules, the awkwardness, the perpetual scent of turnips, and the chaperones popping up like medieval jump scares, you keep showing up. You keep talking. Smiling. Brushing fingers near the grain sacks when no one's looking. Because this is how it works. Love in the Middle Ages isn't bold. It's quiet. It's slow. It's stolen in moments that don't look like much to anyone else. One quirky little detail. In some alpine villages, there was a tradition of building small wooden, courting huts, for supervised dates. Picture this, two teens sitting stiffly in a cabin smaller than an outhouse, with parents sitting just outside, ears pressed to the walls. Romantic. You walk home at dusk. The air smells of peat and soup. Your shoes squelch in the mud, and you're already dreading tomorrow's chores. But you think of their smile. Their laugh when you joked about the goat with one eye. The way they glanced back as the crowd swallowed them up. It's not freedom. It's not ease. But it's something. And for now, it's enough. You wake to a rooster that's clearly working through something emotional, and a draft that reminds you your home has more holes than walls. But your thoughts aren't on the cold or the rooster or the half-frozen mush you're about to eat for breakfast. They're on poetry. Specifically, how the nobility writes it about people they aren't even allowed to touch. Today, you're heading toward the castle, well, not inside the castle. You're not that important. But you're close enough to see the banners flapping, and maybe hear a bard trying to rhyme virtue with blue. Because today, there's a troubadour performing. Which means an audience of squirming noble children, bored ladies-in-waiting, and one countess who has already mentally left the room. You settle onto the edge of a wagon wheel to listen, pretending to adjust a strap on your sandal while eavesdropping like a total commoner. The bard strums a lute, singing about courtly love, that bizarre, impractical, and totally fascinating medieval concept that basically says, let's fall deeply, painfully in love, but never actually touch each other. Welcome to the aristocrat's idea of romance. Courtly love is like the fantasy football league of medieval dating. None of it affects the real world, but people take it very seriously. It's all about a nobleman devoting himself to a usually married noblewoman. He writes songs for her, swears to fight dragons in her name, stares longingly across candlelit banquet halls, and then goes home to his actual wife, who's busy running the estate and managing linen accounts. Historians still argue whether anyone took this stuff seriously, or if it was just medieval roleplay for rich people with too much time and too many quills. Some believe it was all metaphor, symbolic adoration meant to elevate the soul. Others think it was an emotional workaround for marriages based on land and lineage. You know, a way to feel something. But either way, the rules are weird. First, the woman must be unattainable. Second, the man must suffer. Third, the love must remain unconsummated. Fourth, you must write at least one poem where you compare her eyes to something vaguely dangerous, like fire or falcons. You shift, trying not to laugh as the bard passionately sings, her breath is like a rose in winter's grip. That's either very beautiful or kind of insulting. You can't tell. In truth, courtly love has its roots in the 12th century, especially in the courts of Eleanor of Aquitaine. There, troubadours, many of them former knights with a flair for drama, spun tales of chivalry and longing. It was emotional theater. Real relationships were messy and practical. Courtly love was romantic suffering with extra ruffles. Back in the village, it starts to trickle down. Not the actual rules, mind you, you're not going to see a goat herder writing a sonnet about a barmaid's swan-like throat. But the idea that love should feel poetic? That lingers. Young people start whispering poems to one another, passing carved trinkets, sneaking glances that echo the longing of courtly lovers, even if they have to chase pigs 5 minutes later. It becomes a kind of aspirational love. You might not have a tower or a lute, but you can still feel the feelings. One quirky tidbit: in parts of southern France, there were courts of love, mock trials where noblewomen would judge love disputes. Real testimonies. Real verdicts. No legal power whatsoever. Just dramatic opinions. Imagine being told your heartbreak was invalid due to lack of emotional suffering. Tough crowd. And yes, for the nobles, it gets absurd. Knights would perform deeds of valor just to earn a token from their lady, a glove, a handkerchief, a single look. One knight apparently vowed to eat only food touched by his beloved. Another refused to sleep in a bed unless it faced the direction of her estate. Romance or obsessive GPS? You decide. Of course, the big secret is that many of these unattainable ladies were perfectly aware of the game, and occasionally, they played along a little too enthusiastically. Letters survive with just enough double meaning to raise eyebrows. And while the rules said the love should stay pure, you and I both know humans have a habit of breaking rules, especially the really juicy ones. You wander back home from the performance, mind spinning. The bard's songs cling to your thoughts like dew on grass. You think about your own maybe romance. Could you write a poem for them? Could you describe their eyes without mentioning hay dust? You try a line out loud, your smile is like a warm goat. No. Definitely not. Still, something lingers. A sense that even in a world full of dung and dampness and endless supervision, there's space for longing. For drama. For the kind of love that feels bigger than yourself, even if it has to stay locked inside your ribs, like a secret. That night, lying under your thatch roof, you imagine a story where you're the knight. They're the noble. You pen odes by candlelight. You swear to defend their honor in battle. In real life, you trip over cabbages and pray you don't sneeze in front of them. But hey, even a peasant can dream. Morning breaks with a thick layer of mist that clings to your skin and makes everything smell like soggy burlap. Your boots are still damp from yesterday, because, of course, they are, and your stomach grumbles as you step into the cold light of day. But you're not thinking about breakfast. You're thinking about the fair. It's May Day, and for once, the village doesn't look like a backdrop for mild suffering. Bunting made from scraps of fabric flutters in the breeze, someone stuck flowers into the cracks between stones, and even the pigs look vaguely festive. Today, there's music. There's food. And most importantly, there's flirting. Glorious, muddy, awkward, medieval flirting. You make your way through the crowd. Children are already chasing hoops, someone's trying to juggle turnips, and the blacksmith is attempting to dance, which mostly involves stomping in time with a drum and looking slightly terrified. Your maybe sweetheart is here too. You spot them near the maypole, their cheeks already pink from the chill or the cider, or maybe, just maybe, because they saw you. This is your chance. The fair is one of the few times in the year when people are allowed to loosen up. Not completely, of course, there are still elders watching with the intensity of underpaid hawks, but just enough that you might steal a real conversation. Maybe even a touch. Scandalous. You edge closer, heart thudding, mouth dry. You offer them a honey cake, which is about as smooth as medieval courtship gets. They smile. You pretend not to see their cousin trailing behind them like an overprotective sheepdog. May Day isn't just about fun, it's packed with ancient rituals, many of which involve pairing off. In some regions, it was tradition for young men and women to head into the woods overnight, returning the next morning with wildflowers and plausible deniability. Did they just gather herbs? Did they do something less innocent? Historians still argue whether these Greenwood customs were tolerated acts of fertility celebration or just bad behavior wrapped in tradition. Back at the fair, the games begin. You enter a sack race, mostly to impress them, though you immediately trip over your own enthusiasm and land face first in a puddle. They laugh, kindly, you think. You dust yourself off with what little dignity you have and grin. Later, there's dancing around the maypole. Long ribbons stretch from the top, and pairs weave in and out in dizzying circles. You're not good at it, your steps are out of time, and someone's elbow hits your ribs, but you don't care. You're dancing. With them. In public. And no one's stopping you. One quirky little tidbit, in some villages, the person crowned May Queen was believed to bring luck to crops and marriages. Naturally, this led to fierce competition, and once, a brawl involving a goose, 2 pies, and a broken lute. You try not to think about that as this year's queen is hoisted onto a cart covered in daisies. After the dancing, there's a feast. Or at least a rustic version of one. Roasted meats, boiled roots, beer so weak it's basically grain-flavored water. You sit side by side on a bench made from a barrel, knees brushing, laughter bubbling up like it has somewhere to be. You talk. Really talk. About dreams. About goats. About the possibility of a better tunic next year. And somehow, it feels normal. Not like a business deal. Not like a chaperoned interrogation. Just 2 people, breathing the same smoky air, wondering if something might come of this. Still, you're not naive. You know your families will get involved soon. They'll talk land, livestock, lineage. Your feelings are, at best, a footnote in that negotiation. But you still allow yourself a little hope. The sun begins to sink behind the trees. Torches are lit, casting long shadows across the muddy ground. A fiddler starts up again, and someone starts spinning a tale about a bear that stole a wedding ring. You don't listen. You're watching them, and they're watching you. And then, very carefully, very quickly, you reach over and take their hand. No one sees. Or at least, no one says anything. It's not forever. It might not even be real by next week. But for one golden, cider-sweet evening, it feels like it is. That night, walking home in the dark with the music still echoing in your ears, you realize something: this is how love survives here. Not with grand declarations or roses or sweeping kisses in the rain. But with small moments, stolen glances, shared laughter, and the kind of touch that could get you scolded by an uncle. Because in a world ruled by mud and manners and marriage contracts, even the smallest sparks matter. You wake up sore, slightly hungover from cheap ale, and with flower petals still clinging to your hair. Your head is full of the fair, the dancing, the hand-holding, the ridiculous story about the ring-stealing bear. But all of that fades the moment your father calls your name. His tone is not festive. You trudge outside, expecting a chore. What you get is a conversation you never asked for. He's been talking with your maybe beloved's family. They're negotiating. And just like that, your love story is no longer about smiles or shared honey cakes. It's about goats. Marriage in your world is many things. Sacred, sure. Social, yes. But above all else, transactional. It's not about romance, not really. It's about merging families, consolidating resources, producing offspring, and ensuring that nobody dies alone in a ditch with no heirs to till the cabbage field. Your father gets to the point, they're offering a pig, 2 hens, and a bit of barley land. You try not to scream. Welcome to the medieval marriage market, where dowries and bride prices are the currency of the heart. If you're a woman, your parents must give something to marry you off. If you're a man, you might have to pay for your bride. Either way, you're not just getting married, you're getting traded. And age? It's relative. Peasant girls might marry at 14, boys a little older, though there's no strict rule. Among the nobility, girls could be betrothed at 5, though the marriage wouldn't be consummated until later. Historians still debate how common early marriages were across regions. Some claim it was the norm, others point to plenty of people marrying in their 20s. But for you? It's happening now. The village priest gets wind of it almost immediately, because of course he does. He's excited. Not because he believes in love, but because more married couples mean more tithes, more baptisms, and fewer rumors of fornication. You walk to the other family's cottage later that day, heart racing. It's not a proposal, it's a meeting. You, them, both sets of parents, and an aunt who clearly lives for this kind of drama. The adults do most of the talking. You and your maybe future spouse sit there silently, occasionally sneaking glances, not sure if you're thrilled or terrified. The terms are laid out. You'll move into a small room above their family's hearth. You'll help with the harvest. They'll help your family during lambing season. There's some haggling over the quality of the hens. It's wildly romantic. Then someone brings out ale, which means the deal is almost done. One weird tidbit, in some parts of England, a shoe was placed on the bride's head during these negotiations as a symbol of transfer. Yes, really. Footwear as property rights. You're relieved that your village doesn't go quite that far, though someone does make a joke about livestock breeding that makes you want to melt into the floor. The next day, the banns are read aloud in church. 3 Sundays in a row, your names will be announced so that anyone who knows a reason why you shouldn't marry, like a secret spouse in another parish, can speak up. Most people use it as a way to gossip, not intervene. During this time, you're technically engaged, which mostly means everyone starts watching you even harder. If you so much as sit on the same hay bale together, 3 people will mention temptation and 1 will quote scripture. Dating in public was hard. Now it's practically forensic investigation. But there's a strange comfort in it too. A shift in how people look at you. You're not just a youth now, you're becoming someone's spouse. People ask about your future home, about children. You're barely old enough to remember your own childhood, and now you're expected to start raising your own. Still, preparations begin. You help gather rushes for the floor of the house you'll soon share. They hem a slightly nicer tunic for you. The priest asks if you've had the birds and bees talk with your parents. You absolutely have not, and now you want to disappear forever. Wedding customs vary wildly. If you were noble, this would involve months of planning, complicated contracts, maybe even political alliances. But as peasants, it's far simpler, though no less binding. One scholarly debate still lingering. Some argue that medieval marriages weren't truly valid unless consummated, while others claim the verbal agreement, witnessed by peers, was enough. You're not sure which version applies here, you just know the wedding is fast approaching and your stomach won't stop flipping. You do get one moment alone with your soon-to-be. It's in the churchyard, under the pretense of checking the flower garlands. You don't say much. Just a few words. A laugh. But your hands touch, and it doesn't feel like a deal or a contract or a livestock exchange. It feels real. That night, as the village prepares for the wedding, someone strings lanterns made from animal bladders and tallow. They sway in the breeze like pale balloons. Kids practice throwing flower petals. Someone tries to tune a hurdy-gurdy. It's not going well. You lie awake, listening to the crackle of the hearth and your father's soft snoring. You're about to be married. You barely know what that means. You're not sure you're ready. But no one ever is, not here. And tomorrow, you step into that life. One step. One vow. One goat-based agreement at a time. The next morning, the village feels different. There's an odd hush in the air, like the world is holding its breath just for you. Someone's sweeping the church steps with more enthusiasm than usual. Even the pigs seem unusually clean. Or maybe you're just seeing everything through the blurry haze of nerves. It's your wedding day. You sit still while your mother yanks a wooden comb through your hair, muttering about tangles and not embarrassing the family. The tunic you're wearing has been patched and pressed to within an inch of its life. It smells faintly of lavender, and more strongly of smoke, like everything else in your life. There's no fancy bridal march. No white gown. No dramatic, speak now or forever hold your peace, moment. Just a gathering in front of the church, a muddy patch of ground trodden flat by years of heavy boots and heavier rain. You stand there, waiting. Your soon-to-be spouse approaches, also freshly scrubbed and visibly terrified. Their hands are clean, their hair oiled back, and their best wool cloak is already picking up flecks of straw. The priest arrives, looking vaguely annoyed that someone scheduled a wedding before his second breakfast. He clears his throat and opens a tiny book that smells like mildew and mackerel. The ceremony is short, mostly muttered Latin, some call and response that you try not to mess up, and a lot of references to God, fertility, and obedience. At one point, he asks if either of you has been pledged to another. You both shake your heads quickly, even though technically someone tried to betroth your spouse to a merchant's daughter once, but she moved to another village, and anyway, it never got past a chicken and a handshake. You exchange tokens, often a ring, if you can afford one, but sometimes a knife, a piece of cloth, or in one famously poor village, a carved turnip. Your family sprung for a copper ring, which turns your finger green, but looks impressive for about 20 minutes. And just like that, you're married. There's no kiss, not publicly. That's a little too French for your priest. Just a brief prayer and a muttered amen, and then people start clapping in that awkward, slightly confused way medieval peasants do when they're not sure if joy is allowed in church. Then the real event begins, the wedding feast. The village green transforms into a chaotic buffet. Barrels of ale are rolled into place. Tables are dragged out, covered in coarse cloth, and laden with whatever people could spare, stews, hard bread, root vegetables, and the occasional pie of dubious origin. Someone roasts a pig, and it sent coils through the air like a promise. You and your new spouse sit at the center of it all, on mismatched stools, surrounded by laughing family members who are already a little tipsy and saying things like, "Just wait till the first baby, then you'll be the one cooking with one hand and chasing toddlers with the other." The ale flows, and soon, so do the stories. Your uncle recounts his own wedding, which apparently involved a goat, 2 buckets of eels, and an uninvited juggler. Nobody believes him, but everyone listens anyway. Music begins, fiddles, drums, and a flute that hits just enough right notes to stay on the good side of tolerable. People start dancing. Not gracefully. There are elbows in faces and near misses with open fire pits. But it's joyful. Chaotic. Alive. One weird wedding tradition floats by: someone tosses a shoe into the crowd, and whoever catches it is supposed to be next to marry. It smacks a pig herder in the face. He looks vaguely concerned. Historians still argue whether these village feasts were actual legal obligations or simply social expectations. Either way, not throwing one could get you whispered about for years, especially by those who contributed the onions. As the feast continues, the couple, that's you, is expected to drink ale from a shared cup, symbolizing unity. It's more of a logistical challenge than a tender moment, as you try not to spill half the drink down your front while avoiding locking eyes awkwardly. Later, there's a moment where you and your spouse are supposed to leave. Discreetly. Sort of. But let's be honest, the entire village knows exactly what's supposed to happen next. In some regions, there were even bedding ceremonies, where the couple would be led to their room with loud, drunk singing, and a bed blessed by the priest before the door was shut and everyone immediately began speculating. Thankfully, your village is slightly less theatrical. You sneak away under the pretense of checking on the chickens. No one is fooled. Inside your new shared space, a loft above their parents' main room, you sit awkwardly. The bed is made of straw and lumpy wool, and there's a jug of water on a rickety table. You both avoid eye contact for several long moments. Then, one of you laughs. Quietly. The tension cracks. You talk. About the food. About the music. About your uncle's eel story. The pressure lifts, if only slightly. You don't know what this marriage will become. It might grow into love. It might not. But for tonight, there's kindness. And maybe that's enough. You lie down, exhausted from too much ale and too many muddy toasts, and the sounds of the feast still drift in through the shutters. Laughter. Fiddle music. Someone yelling about pickles. You're married. You didn't get roses or poetry or sunset proposals. But you got a ring, a pig roast, and one fleeting smile before falling asleep. And honestly, that's not a bad start. Morning in your new life starts with someone's mother shouting about spilled buttermilk, a chicken in the grain sack, and, oh, yes, your presence above the hearth. Married life waits for no one, and neither does farm work. You roll out of bed, limbs stiff from straw, and blink against the gray morning light. Your new spouse is already pulling on boots, offering a sleepy half-smile before disappearing downstairs. So much for lazy newlywed mornings. You're not in a ballad. You're in a 2-room cottage with drafty walls and exactly one wooden spoon between you. Welcome to married life in medieval times, less wine and roses, more mud and repetition. Your role in the household depends on gender, custom, and whether or not someone's already yelling about the livestock. For peasants like you, marriage is mostly practical. 2 people working together means more food, more hands, more chance of surviving winter without chewing on bark. If you're a woman, your new responsibilities include everything. Cooking, cleaning, spinning, weaving, feeding animals, helping in the fields, and raising children, because yes, that part usually happens fast. If you're a man, your life stays largely the same, but now with slightly fewer clean socks. You're expected to be a team. Sort of. You do the work. They do the work. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you do it side by side without arguing over who forgot to milk the goat. There's affection, too, often quietly built over time. Marriages in your world are rarely based on passion. But they grow into partnership. Familiarity. Shared jokes and matching blisters. You learn each other's habits, how they hum when they need dough, how you curse under your breath when trying to repair a fence. One fun fringe detail, in certain parts of medieval Scandinavia, newlyweds were gifted a marriage spoon, not symbolic, but practical. It was the only spoon they owned, so they'd share it at every meal. Talk about intimacy. Back in your home, you spend the morning scrubbing a pot with sand and water, while your spouse mends a torn tunic. The chores pile up like always: patch the roof, prepare the meal, feed the animals, argue gently about who forgot to dry the firewood. It's not glamorous. But there's rhythm in it. Children are the next expected chapter. Not necessarily because you want them, but because survival depends on them. You need hands to help with the work. Heirs to pass down what little you have. And in this world, child mortality is heartbreakingly common. 1 or 2 surviving children out of 5 or 6 births isn't unusual. So when your spouse starts feeling faint one morning and someone whispers, "blessing," everything changes. Pregnancy in the Middle Ages is not what you'd call medically sound. Midwives serve as the village's primary care, equal parts healer, herbalist, and calming presence. There are prayers, talismans, and a strict avoidance of evil winds, which are blamed for everything from birth defects to bad hair days. Historians still debate whether medieval people truly believed childbirth was divine punishment or simply a natural hazard. Either way, people tread lightly. They whisper blessings, boil herbs, avoid loud noises. You begin fetching buckets, crushing dried mint, helping your spouse as much as possible. One quirky tradition from Eastern Europe involves tying red ribbons to doorframes to ward off malicious spirits during labor. In your village, it's more about stuffing dried lavender into pockets and telling your spouse not to look at cats. The months pass. Your lives settle into a rhythm again. You work, you eat, you occasionally sneak in a smile over a shared bowl of porridge. You begin carving a wooden cradle, hoping you won't jinx anything. Every knock at the door feels like the world holding its breath. And then, the day arrives. Labor is long. Loud. Messy. You're not allowed in the room, you're outside, pacing the dirt path like your boots are on fire, listening for sounds from behind the curtain of bundled cloth and whispering women. Hours pass. You forget how to breathe. And then, a cry. A single, piercing, tiny cry. The midwife emerges, red-faced and triumphant, holding a squirming bundle. You're a parent. There's no training, no preparation, no sleep. Just this tiny, wrinkled human who already looks unimpressed with the world. You hold them for the first time, your hands shaking, your heart caught somewhere between wonder and terror. They sneeze. You panic. The midwife laughs. The days that follow blur into one long, sleepless miracle. You learn to swaddle, to rock, to soothe. Your spouse sings lullabies, off-key and tired. The cradle creaks. The fire crackles. For now, you are safe. And in the middle of all this, somehow, you fall a little more in love. Not with fireworks or sonnets, but with the way they hold the baby. The way they whisper to you in the dark. The way their hand finds yours without thinking. This is medieval marriage. Not perfect. Not poetic. But real. Steady. Built on small acts of care and mountains of shared work. You once dreamed of love letters and stolen glances. What you got was muddy boots, crying infants, and someone who reaches for you when the roof leaks in the night. And honestly, that's its own kind of poetry. The seasons spin on, like the wheel you now use to spin flax. Your hands are never clean anymore, always coated in dust or dough or baby spit. Your back aches in new, creative ways. But you're no longer just someone's child or someone's crush, you're part of a unit. A household. A team held together by chores, childbirth, and the occasional laugh over who dropped the ladle in the stew. Life in the village settles into its old rhythm, but now, you're playing a different role in the chorus. You're no longer watching from the sidelines. You are the couple that younger villagers glance at and whisper about. Sometimes it's admiration. Sometimes it's pity. Sometimes it's just surprise that you're still together and haven't killed each other with a butter churn. You and your spouse aren't in love like the bards sing about. Not the burning, tragic, die for you sort of thing. But there's something steadier here. They save you the last scoop of pottage. They wake you for church when you forget. You patch their cloak. They fix your shoes. Is it passion? Maybe not. But it's something that lasts longer. Still, every now and then, something shakes the routine. Like when a traveling merchant passes through and starts telling stories about cities. Real cities. With cobbled roads, stone buildings, and entire shops devoted to nothing but cheese. You sit in the tavern with the rest of the village, wide-eyed as he spins tales of romance and scandal in the courts of Paris or Venice. According to him, dating there is practically performance art. Noble ladies drop handkerchiefs accidentally at masked balls, and courtiers fight duels over sideways glances. One lady had 6 lovers, a pet swan, and her own poet. Another got married in a gondola while a choir floated by on a barge. Everyone laughs, especially the blacksmith, who thinks the swan part is made up. But something sticks in your chest. Not envy exactly. Just a quiet ache for something different. Back in your own world, courtship is still alive among the unmarried. You watch younger couples try to navigate the same path you once did, chaperones, stolen glances, awkward fares. You find yourself shaking your head, offering advice you swore you'd never say aloud, don't rush it. Watch how they treat their animals. If their parents argue all the time, pay attention. You and your spouse are no longer new at this. You know how to work around each other, how to fight and make up, how to get through a freezing winter with one good blanket and a single candle. That doesn't mean it's easy. You fight, sometimes. Over bread. Over money. Over who forgot to feed the chickens. Your voices rise, words spill out, doors slam. But then someone says something ridiculous, like, at least the goat still likes me, and it breaks. You laugh. You fix what you can. You try again the next day. One odd bit of medieval folklore suggests that if couples argued too much during harvest season, the next year's crops would fail. Naturally, that leads to some extremely tense silences while digging potatoes. You're not superstitious, but still, you save the loud fights for winter. And yes, there are moments when the spark fades. You wonder if this is all it will ever be. You wake up next to the same person, eat the same porridge, scold the same child for trying to ride the pig again. Sometimes your conversations are nothing more than grunts and nods over a wheelbarrow. You start to worry, is this what love turns into? Historians still debate how much romance actually existed in long-term medieval marriages. Some letters between spouses show deep affection. Others are businesslike, functional. Some are clearly forged by monks trying to prove everyone in the past was very pious and never made fart jokes. But in the quiet spaces, between hauling water and hanging herbs to dry, you see it. The way your spouse holds your child while they sleep. The way they still reach for your hand in a thunderstorm. The way they remembered your favorite feast day bread and traded 3 eggs to get it. And then something truly unexpected happens. A troubadour returns. Not the same one from years ago, this one is older, rounder, with a beard like a broom and a voice like creaking leather. But he sings songs that echo something ancient in your chest. He sings of lovers who survived storms, who aged and changed and still chose each other. Not in palaces, but in huts. Not with roses, but with onion stew and shared shoes. You look at your spouse. Their face is softer now. Lined. Tired. Yours probably looks the same. But when you smile at them across the firelight, something flickers there. Not the bright spark of new love, but the low, steady flame of still here. That night, you sit together under the stars, your child snoring softly inside, a half-moon hanging above the trees. You don't say anything grand. Just sit. Shoulders touching. Breathing the same cold air. You never got the gondola. Or the swan. But you got this. Another year passes. Then another. And suddenly, you're not one of the young lovers anymore. You're the one giving side-eye to teens loitering behind haystacks. You've become the cautionary tale and the quiet hope. Your oldest child is nearly the age you were when you first locked eyes with your spouse over a cart full of rotting turnips. That's a thought that sits awkwardly in your chest, like undercooked barley. You're not ready for this part of the story. Because now, it's your turn to chaperone. It starts with the obvious clues. Your child lingers longer at the well than strictly necessary. They take extra care brushing their hair, and start mumbling evasive things when asked why they're suddenly volunteering to help at the neighbor's sheep pen. You try not to smirk. You try to be patient. But you know exactly what's happening. Soon, your child brings up a name during supper. Casually. Too casually. You nearly choke on your stew. Your spouse raises an eyebrow. You both pretend not to notice how red their ears are. And just like that, you're reliving your own youth, but now from the outside, trying to balance encouragement and supervision, knowing full well what it felt like to sneak glances, hold hands, and be terrified of the village gossip grapevine. You begin attending more market days than you need to, always, accidentally, passing by where you know the object of your child's affections might be. You don't say anything. Not at first. Just, watch. Measure. Is the other one kind? Do they smile right? Do they show respect? One quirky tradition from parts of Wales involved parents hiding nearby while their children courted, watching silently through barn slats or open shutters. You feel absurd doing it, but you also get it. You don't want to interfere, just protect. Guide. Nudge. Meanwhile, your own marriage has become something sturdy. Not perfect, never perfect, but reliable. It creaks in the cold and groans when the days are long, but it doesn't break. It bends. Adjusts. Endures. You still bicker. Still laugh. Sometimes you even sneak out behind the smokehouse like teenagers, just to remember what that felt like. Historians still argue whether medieval couples truly loved each other or just cohabited for necessity's sake. The truth, you think, is both. You've seen marriages that are cold arrangements. But you've also seen warmth, real connection born from years of shared survival, quiet care, and the smallest kindnesses repeated over decades. Your child eventually confesses. There's someone they care about. Someone kind. Hard-working. A bit clumsy. You listen, and a strange ache curls around your heart, part nostalgia, part pride, part fear that you'll have to trade a chicken again. You start the process. Meetings. Conversations. Dowry talks. It feels bizarre, being on this side of it. You're the one negotiating pigs and cloth bundles, nodding solemnly while calculating how much grain you can spare. You try to be fair, but you're also deeply, irrationally biased. Because it's your child. Eventually, the match is agreed upon. Not because the other family is rich or well-connected, but because there's a real possibility of happiness. You see how they look at each other. How they fumble their words and blush and pretend not to be holding hands behind their backs. You remember that feeling. The banns are read. The preparations begin. Your spouse helps mend a new wedding tunic, fingers more experienced than they once were. You gather dried flowers. You teach your child how to stand still during the ceremony and how to smile without looking like they're being tortured. Then the wedding day arrives. You cry. You absolutely weren't planning to, but there you are, weeping into a slightly moldy kerchief while someone hands you a mug of celebratory ale. Your child looks radiant. The partner? Nervous. Endearing. You're filled with a strange, overwhelming hope that they will get the same chance you did, to build something real, something lasting. One fringe belief from certain Germanic communities said that if rain fell on your child's wedding day, it meant good luck and many babies. It drizzles just a little as the couple leaves the church, and everyone cheers like it's the sky blessing the marriage. At the feast, you sit next to your spouse. You've both aged. Lines trace your faces. Your backs ache. You move slower. But when you toast the new couple, your eyes meet, and there's that same flicker from all those years ago. You lean in. Whisper something cheeky. They laugh. Roll their eyes. Take your hand. And you realize something, all the hardships, all the muddy mornings, all the awkward beginnings, they were leading to this. Not just a life together, but a life grown. A family. A legacy. Something bigger than either of you. Later, as the fire burns low and music drifts across the field, you dance. Slowly. Carefully. Not like the wild spins of youth, but a quiet shuffle. A rhythm learned over decades. And for a moment, you forget your aches. Forget the chores. Forget everything except this, two people, moving together through the long, soft dusk of their years. The days after the wedding feel eerily quiet. The rush is over, the decorations have wilted, and you find yourself staring at an empty bowl, wondering how time managed to slip so quietly out the door. Your child has moved in with their new spouse, just across the village green. Not far, but far enough that the cottage feels too big. Too silent. You keep expecting to hear their voice, their boots clomping over the threshold, their off-key humming while hauling buckets. But all you hear is the drip of water from the rafters and the rhythmic sound of your spouse softly snoring. And so, you settle into a new rhythm. Your own marriage has shifted again, quietly, like a cart changing direction in the mud. With the children mostly grown, it's just the two of you again, navigating a version of life that feels both familiar and entirely different. You wake, work, rest, repeat. You talk less, but understand more. A look, a grunt, a pause, all become full sentences. Sometimes, you sit in the sun and just be. Side by side. Not needing to fill the silence, because you've already said all the important things over the years. Sometimes more than once. Sometimes louder than necessary. Your body has changed too. Joints crack. Your eyesight plays tricks. You forget things, like where you put the axe or whether you actually salted the stew. Your spouse teases you gently, then forgets where they left the broom. You call it even. The village around you keeps turning. Children play. Couples argue. Animals get born, get eaten, get replaced. Life hums, unbothered. You become the ones people come to for advice. You try not to laugh when the younger couples complain about how hard marriage is. You nod sagely, hiding your grin. One quirky medieval belief held that older couples were the sole anchors of a village, stabilizers of mood, rhythm, and gossip. You suppose that's flattering, if slightly ominous. You don't feel like a sole anchor. You feel like someone who needs a nap and a bowl of warm broth. One afternoon, you walk with your spouse to the churchyard. It's not a special occasion. Just something to do. You stroll past the graves, many of which now hold names you remember from childhood. Neighbors. Friends. A few you didn't like, but miss anyway. There's one small plot, freshly turned. A woman who lived alone, had no children. Your spouse frowns. We should bring flowers next week, they say. You nod. The world is full of small kindnesses now, no grand gestures, just simple, steady acts that mean more than they look like. Back home, a traveling friar passes through. He offers blessings, sells small relics, most of them probably fake, and tells dramatic tales of miracles and visions. He's a bit of a showman, but the villagers love it. He speaks about love lasting beyond life. About married couples who find each other again in heaven. Your spouse raises an eyebrow. Only if heaven has decent ale, they mutter. You snort into your stew. Historians still argue whether the average medieval person truly believed in romantic love surviving death. Some tombs show couples buried hand in hand. Others were divided by status or custom. But the idea lingers, hope, perhaps, that something as simple and difficult as love might stretch beyond the grave. One evening, you're sitting by the fire when your spouse asks, "Do you remember our first fair?" You blink. Of course you do. The flowers. The dancing. The way you tripped during the maypole and nearly took out the baker's son. You both laugh. You talk about the bard who sang about swan breath and tormented love. About your wedding day. About the rain on your child's wedding. About the way the cradle creaked every time the wind blew. All these tiny details you thought had been swept away by time are still there, dusty, but not lost. And then, a rare moment, your spouse stands, takes your hand, and pulls you up. No music. No audience. Just a soft shuffle across the hearthstones. A dance, slow and quiet. Two people. Two stories. Still moving, even now. You lean your head on their shoulder and close your eyes. Not because you're tired, but because you're full. Outside, a storm rolls gently across the sky. The thatched roof holds. The fire crackles. And your heart, despite everything, mud, blisters, childbirth, dowries, arguments, loss, is soft. Steady. Because here you are. Still together. Still dancing. The first frost arrives with little warning. One morning, you wake to find a thin layer of ice tracing the edge of your water bucket, spiderwebbing over the surface like fragile lace. Your breath clouds the air in silver puffs as you pull your shawl tighter, listening to the wood creak and settle under the cold. You've been through many winters, but each one feels a little heavier now. The snow seems deeper, the wind sharper, your fingers slower to warm. Your spouse winces more when getting out of bed, and you both grunt like old tree trunks when you kneel by the fire to stoke the embers. But there's still a rhythm. You know how to prepare: stock the root cellar, stuff wool into the cracks of the door, double layer the blankets, and remind the grandchildren not to lick the frozen pump handle. Again. Your grandchildren. That's still a thought that warms you. They visit often, stumbling through the door like little whirlwinds of noise and chaos. One is obsessed with frogs. Another steals your knitting needles to turn them into imaginary swords. One insists on calling you Grand Goose for reasons no one entirely understands. Your child, now fully grown and weathered themselves, visits too, usually with a loaf of bread or a new complaint about rising grain prices. You listen. Nod. Offer tea. Sometimes, you tease. Sometimes, you surprise yourself with how much you sound like your own mother now. Historians sometimes forget to talk about this part of medieval life, the long, slow settling. The chapter after the big events. After the marriages, the births, the feasts. But this, too, is history. These quiet, daily acts. The wool mending. The soup making. The way your spouse still tucks the blanket around your feet without saying anything. One day, the village priest comes by with a young couple, newly betrothed, nervous, asking about married life. The priest introduces you both as pillars of the community. You nearly choke on your broth. Your spouse mutters, more like mossy fence posts. Still, you welcome them in. Offer stew. Listen. Tell a few stories, mostly the funny ones. The turnip token. The stolen shoe. The goose-chasing wedding brawl. You leave out the harder parts, not to lie, but to let them find their own way. When they ask how you stayed together so long, your spouse answers without hesitation, "We were too stubborn to quit." Then you add, "And we learned to laugh more than we yelled." The couple smiles. Nervously. You remember being them once, wide-eyed and unsure, clinging to stories like handrails. After they leave, you and your spouse sit in silence for a while. The fire crackles. The wind whistles outside. Your knees ache. But your hand finds theirs, and you squeeze gently. Later, you take out an old bundle of cloth tucked behind the hearth, letters, scraps, tiny mementos, a dried flower from the fair, a piece of blue ribbon, a stone your child once declared magic. You spread them on the table. Your spouse joins you. You look over everything. Remember. Laugh softly. Sometimes tear up. Not because it hurts, but because it mattered. One particularly odd relic, a small wooden spoon, worn smooth, brings back a memory you'd long forgotten, your first meal as a married couple. Turnip soup. Cold. Terrible. You ate every bite anyway. Together. That night, as you climb into bed, the wind howls like a choir of wolves, and you huddle close under the quilt. Your spouse whispers, "Still with me?" You whisper back, always. Historians still argue whether common folk in medieval times lived rich emotional lives. Whether they had true love, real intimacy, lasting joy. But you know the answer. You've lived it. It didn't look like the troubadour songs. It wasn't fireworks or grand declarations or swans in gondolas. It was harder. Slower. Quieter. But it was also deeper. Truer. Woven into the very soil beneath your feet. The next morning, there's a light dusting of snow. Your grandchild bursts in shouting, the pond's frozen. You help them bundle up, laugh as they forget one mitten, and send them out to the world. You watch from the doorway, your spouse beside you. Their arm brushes yours. You don't need to speak. Love in the medieval world was never simple. Never clean. But here, in this quiet, frost-bitten morning, wrapped in the breath of children and the smoke of your own chimney, you understand. You've built a love that's lived many seasons. And somehow, it still blooms. The days stretch short now, each one beginning in dim blue-gray light and ending not long after noon in a hush of shadows. The world seems to shrink in winter. The forest feels closer. The fields lie quiet under frost. The road outside your cottage barely sees more than a couple muddy boots pass by in a day. Still, inside, life continues. You rise early, more out of habit than necessity. Your joints complain. Your breath leaves your body in steam. Your spouse mumbles something unintelligible and pulls the blanket tighter. Some things never change. There is peace in the routine. A kind of stillness earned after decades of living every version of this life, youthful confusion, love-struck idiocy, the burden of child-rearing, the fear of plague years, the long slog of too many winters and too few good shoes. And now, this. The quiet season of marriage. You boil water for porridge. Your spouse stirs it with slow, rhythmic turns. You both sit, sipping from mismatched cups, occasionally trading glances when the fire pops loud enough to make you flinch. Words are unnecessary now. You could live entire days in silence and still feel heard. This morning, you find an old pair of your child's shoes while sweeping under the chest. Tiny, bent at the toe, still stained with ash from when they kicked over a pot trying to walk. You hold them in your hand a long moment, the leather cracked and fragile, like a memory you didn't realize was still tucked away. You remember that year, hard, bitter cold, barely enough food, the cow pregnant and moody. You and your spouse took turns going hungry so the child could eat. You argued more. But you also held each other more. You clung, then, because letting go wasn't an option. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant marriages were mostly pragmatic arrangements, born of necessity rather than feeling. And yes, they often were. But the mistake is in thinking that pragmatism and love are mutually exclusive. You didn't stay together this long just because it was convenient. You stayed because you chose to, again and again, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Outside, the village is quiet. The blacksmith's hammer rings now and then. The baker's smoke spirals into the clouds. A dog barks in the distance, then goes quiet again. The world is slowed down in this season, like a long breath held between snowfall and thaw. And yet, even in winter, there is life. Your youngest grandchild is toddling now, arms wide like a drunken goose, shouting nonsense words with the authority of a king. They come by every few days, trailing mud and questions. One day, they ask, "Are you and grandspouse in love?" You choke slightly on your tea. Your spouse laughs and says, "Not always." But enough. Later that evening, you think about the question again. Are you still in love? Yes. But not in the way ballads would recognize. Your love is not petals and perfume, it is onions and wool. It's the way your spouse still heats the stone to warm your side of the bed. The way you automatically check their boots for holes each week. It's remembering how they like their eggs, and that they never say, "I love you," out loud, but always cut your bread a little thicker than theirs. One quirky medieval belief said that if you dreamed of planting onions and your spouse appeared in the dream, it meant enduring love. You'd always thought that was silly. Now, it feels oddly true. Your evenings are slower now. You take turns reading, when your eyes allow it. The same tales over and over. Saints, martyrs, heroes with improbable hair. Sometimes you make up endings when the candle burns too low. Sometimes your spouse falls asleep mid-sentence, and you just let them rest. You've stopped needing to prove anything to each other. There's no need for grand apologies or declarations. If someone forgets to close the shutter, the other closes it without a word. If someone coughs in the night, the other puts a hand on their back until the fit passes. It's instinct now, woven into the bones. You sit at the edge of the hearth, feet stretched toward the embers. Your spouse, nearby, polishing a spoon you both know no one uses anymore. The air smells of old time and the faint musk of stored apples. You realize, you are living history. Not the kind written in ledgers or carved into church walls, but the real kind. The human kind. A life shared, not for legend, but for living. You smile. You remember being 16, tripping through mud, flushed with nerves, dreaming of love like it was a firework. Now, you're 73, and you know better. Love isn't a firework. It's the flame that stays lit when the wind howls. Spring returns in slow, shy footsteps. At first it's only the hint of green under the snow, the drip 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 of meltwater from the roof, the sudden appearance of birdsong before dawn. But soon, the world begins to stir in earnest. Buds appear on trees, lambs bleat from nearby fields, and the village wakes from its long slumber with the energy of a child full of barley cakes. You and your spouse stretch stiffly into the new season. Your knees ache a little less in the mornings. The air no longer bites. You open the shutters and let light spill into your home. Dust motes dance like tiny spirits above the table. There's planting to be done. The grandchildren come to help, sort of, mostly they jump in the furrows and steal the seed bags when you're not looking. You and your spouse exchange long-suffering glances and try not to laugh when the smallest one accidentally plants a shoe. You work side by side in the garden, as you always have. One digs, the other drops in seed. Your rhythm is practiced, unspoken. A dance without music. And as you pat the soil down with your palms, you remember planting your first garden together. Back when you had barely any tools, and the soil was rocky, and you argued about how deep to dig. You didn't know then that you were also planting something else. Something that would grow slowly. Unpredictably. But deep. This spring feels quieter, somehow. Not in a sad way, just in the way that things slow down when they no longer need to hurry. You've lived so many seasons together that you start to feel like you've seen everything once before. And yet, the world keeps surprising you. One afternoon, your spouse brings home a gift, a little wooden charm, carved into the shape of a bird. Saw it at market, they mutter, trying not to meet your eyes. Felt like you'd like it. You do. More than they know. Not because it's fancy, it isn't. Not because it's perfect, it's definitely not. But because after all these years, they still think of you while standing among baskets of onions and salted fish. That's the kind of love people rarely write poems about. But it's the kind you can live in, comfortably, for decades. Historians still debate how much emotional depth existed in peasant marriages, whether people just endured each other or truly chose each other, again and again. But you know the truth. You've lived it. You've bickered. Argued. Sat through long silences. Felt unseen. Felt overwhelmed. You've cried alone in the woods and cursed the world for being unfair. You've wondered what your life might have been like if you'd married someone else, or never married at all. And yet, here you are. Planting onions together. Laughing at bent spoons. Watching the youngest grandchild try to feed a goose a turnip. There's a feast approaching. One of the saints' days, though no one can quite remember which saint or why he was important. Doesn't matter. It's an excuse for bread, music, and dancing, and the village never passes that up. You and your spouse sit at the edge of the gathering, wrapped in cloaks, sipping spiced ale. The music is too loud for your liking, and someone definitely burned the first round of pies, but it's familiar. Warm. Alive. Couples dance. Young ones, mostly. Awkward. Hopeful. Some you recognize from long ago, children now grown, their own stories beginning. You smile. Your spouse leans closer. Do you think we look that ridiculous? They ask. No, you whisper. We looked worse. You both laugh. Someone brings out a fiddle. The music changes to a slower tune, one meant for older feet and simpler steps. You're nudged, gently, toward the center of the green. You hesitate. Your knees aren't what they used to be. Your balance is more optimistic than reliable. But your spouse stands first and reaches for your hand. And once again, after all this time, you dance. It's not graceful. There are no gasps of admiration. But people smile. Some clap. The children cheer. You move slowly, carefully, each step a quiet memory. Your hand in theirs, your eyes meeting briefly under the stars. You don't talk during the dance. You don't need to. Every sway, every turn, every breath shared says what words never quite could. Later that night, wrapped in blankets, your spouse turns to you and says, softly, I think we've done all right. You nod. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because there's nothing more to add. The seasons have turned. The world has changed. Your family has grown. Your bodies have aged. But your love, that quiet, stubborn, worn-in kind, remains. It isn't flashy. It isn't perfect. The years weigh softly now, like the thick woolen blankets you wrap around yourself on cold mornings. Time has smoothed the rough edges of your life, but it has also carved new lines across your face and your spouse's, like a map of every hardship, every joy, every stolen moment you never thought would matter so much. You wake to birdsong filtering through the cracked windowpane, a sound that never grows old. Your joints protest as you swing your legs over the side of the bed, but the warmth of the fire and the soft murmur of your spouse's breathing remind you that, after all this time, you are still here. Outside, the village begins its slow morning bustle. You hear the distant clatter of wooden carts and the familiar calls of neighbors exchanging news. The world moves on, as it always does, but you and your spouse remain a quiet constant, a worn but steady heart beating in the village's chest. You spend the day in small, comforting routines, tending to the hearth, mending clothes, preparing a simple meal. The scent of rosemary and thyme fills the kitchen as you work side by side, a silent partnership born of decades. Sometimes you share stories, old jokes, the kind that make you both chuckle despite creaky knees and fading eyesight. The grandchildren visit often now, their laughter filling the corners of the house like sunlight. They bring tales of their own adventures, tumbles in the woods, the mischief of village cats, and the dreams they chase. You listen, heart full, offering gentle advice and a steady hand when needed. One evening, as the sun dips low and paints the sky in hues of gold and lavender, you and your spouse sit outside, wrapped in thick shawls. The air is crisp but forgiving. A soft breeze stirs the leaves, carrying with it the distant melody of a fiddler tune from the village green. You hold hands, fingers intertwined like the roots of an ancient tree. There is no need for grand declarations or passionate speeches. Your love is quieter now, steady, enduring, a balm against the passing years. Historians still debate how medieval couples navigated love in their twilight years. Was it devotion? Habit? Something deeper, woven from shared memories and silent understanding? You know the answer lies somewhere between all of those and more. As the stars begin to twinkle overhead, you whisper to your spouse, "We've come a long way, haven't we?" They squeeze your hand gently and reply, "And I wouldn't change a thing." Together, you watch the night deepen, the world settling into peaceful slumber. The fire's glow fades, the wind softens, and your heart eases with the gentle certainty that, after all the seasons passed, you found something timeless. Love that lasts, not just in stories or songs, but in every worn spoon, every shared glance, every quiet moment between two souls who chose each other again and again. You breathe in the night air one last time and close your eyes. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Now, as the night wraps itself gently around you, imagine the soft crackle of a hearth fading into peaceful silence. The world outside your window settles, and you feel the comforting weight of shared years pressing softly against your chest. There's no rush here, no urgency, only the slow, steady rhythm of breath and time. Picture the cool night air brushing lightly against your skin, the gentle whisper of leaves in the trees, and the distant lullaby of village life, quieting down for rest. You are safe. You are seen. You are held by a love built from countless small moments, tender, imperfect, and true. In this calm, the noise of daily life fades. The worries, the hurried steps, the endless chores, all melt away like morning mist under a rising sun. Instead, you feel a gentle warmth, a soft glow spreading from your heart outward, wrapping you in a blanket woven from kindness, memory, and quiet joy. Let your thoughts drift, slow and light, like feathers floating on a gentle breeze. There is nothing you need to do right now except be present with this feeling. The peace of knowing you have lived fully, loved deeply, and shared a story worth telling. So, breathe deeply. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Feel the slow sinking into rest, the steady pulse of comfort and connection guiding you softly towards sleep. May your dreams be gentle, your mind at ease, and your heart full. Good night.